A Story of Friends, Chapter 9. After recovering from the surprise of finding herself so quickly transported back to her own nest, Precious tried to act normal by inviting everyone to stay for dinner that afternoon. Big Egg was a bit confused when he entered the room and saw that he had a nest full of company. He surely must have wondered how he had missed seeing them all enter. Precious introduced her friends to her dad and her brothers, and then asked Meringue if she would like to join her in the kitchen to help her put their meal together. Cracked Egg, would you like to cut some fruit juice while you're getting to know my dad? The two of you can visit while I get something for us to eat, she added. That would be wonderful, Cracked Egg said without giving Precious any clues as to how he had performed the miracle flight that they had just taken. Precious thought that maybe Meringue might be more helpful in their conversation while they cooked. Precious, Meringue, and Patience went into the kitchen and quickly put some rice on the stove, sliced up some fresh vegetables to steam, and began to wash some berries and chop up melons for a fruit salad. As the rice shimmered, she added some raisins and her special combinations of spices to make the rice pudding that everyone who had ever eaten at her house raved about. While they busied themselves with the washing, cutting, and chopping, Meringue talked about the beautiful meadows up in the mountains. She was anticipating showing her friends all of the lovely flowers that they would see on their walk to visit Rainbow. Meringue? Precious began tentatively. How did we get here? Oh, you mean our trip from Cracked Egg's house to here? Meringue smiled with a little giggle. You do have some friends with some mysterious ways, don't you? But don't worry about it. It's not as big a deal as you might think. You will learn that there are some things that may not be ordinary, but are able to be accomplished by anyone when they are ready. You'll see. Now what about those strawberries? Should they all go into the salad, and the mint too? She asked pensively. Yes, thank you. Let's put all the strawberries in. But, continued Precious, can you do that too? That flying in the rainbow egg? I expect we'll have plenty of time together to find out lots of new talents that we all have in the next few days. So we will just be curious and see what happens. And everybody will have a chance to find out a whole lot more about who they are. Meringue went over to the stove to stir the rice and raisin pudding and hummed a little song. Meringue, asked Patience, I don't know that many eggs, but I don't know any that are as beautiful as you are. How did you get so big and fluffy? And you don't even have a shell. Are you still an egg, or are you just fluff? How did you grow so wonderful and foamy? You know, sometimes we just become what we become without really understanding how. Challenges come, and we meet them, and then, all of a sudden, we have changed and grown. But if you like, I'll tell you my story. Oh, I'd love it, said Patience. Me too, said Precious. Well, this is actually a hard story to talk about, and every time I tell it, I feel a little bit sad. It's good, though, to share it, because then I can make a little wish that it will help someone else if they're having a bad time. So here goes. I was born in a very bad place. I was born in the worst place of all for eggs to be laid. I was born in an egg factory. As soon as we were laid, we traveled away from our mothers on a conveyor belt and left on trays of hundreds of little eggs that all just sat under hot lights. I never even knew my mother, as I was separated from her immediately. It was very hot and smelly, and everything in the building was made of steel. Every day the only thing that happened was that was different was when workers hosed down the conveyors and the floor. All the rubbish and manure went shooshing down a big drain that ran between each of the tables filled with eggs. There was no soft, homemade nest for me to rest in, with my mother's warm body keeping me safe and secure. I had never known what should have been, but I did know that something was terribly wrong. I knew that I needed to get out of there or I would die. But can you imagine? Here I was, just a little egg, new to the world. No legs, arms, nothing at all. I had no way to escape, and I knew absolutely nothing about the world. Well, one day there was a big storm. It was very frightening. Thunder roared and lightning cracked and the winds blew. The whole building shook, and the tables full of eggs shook. Hundreds fell on the floor as trays crashed. Their yellow yolks and slimy whites spread a big puddle out over everywhere. I was heartsick as I heard eggs falling and splattering on the floor. Then my tray slid off the table too, and all those that I had come to know in my short life were killed. I rolled a little further than most and fell into the sludge of the drain. Without a moment to even realize what was happening, the slow-moving, murky, yucky ooze carried me along. It wasn't very long before I floated out of the building and into the horrible, stormy night. Then on and on and on I traveled with the sewage and sludge until finally I floated into a stream. By this time I was a mess. I was covered in muddy gunk and cracked all over. Now the stream washed me clean, but tumbled me over and over as we sailed over rocks and around sticks and debris. Of course, I was not a swimmer, so I could only go where the water took me. Sometimes I was knocked up against the riverbanks, and then I was frightened as big animals came looking for a drink or a snack. I stared at a lot of big eyes, hoping that I would not get swallowed up. At night, I felt like I was freezing into ice, and in the day I felt like I was boiling hot. My shell was so cracked I was oozing out of it all over. Every time I'd bump against a rock, another little piece would break off. Finally, the stream led to a big mountain lake with grassy banks and safe and swampy inlets. By that time, I felt barely alive. I floated into a little cove where lots of old leaves and moss covered a sandy beach. I washed ashore and rested for days and days on the warm sands. I barely had any intact shell. I had been shaken up so thoroughly that my insides had become all foamy. Lying there in the sun, I started to expand and expand and expand. Although not as hard as the shell I had had, I developed my own little crispy, baked covering, and of course, I could never return to the way I once was.